And so we're live this evening. Hello and welcome along. My name is Stuart Harris, and this is another Biz TV event. But this is something a wee bit special because tonight we're attempting to do something a little bit different, and we don't mind owning up to the fact, because what we're going to try and do here tonight is combine a webinar with a hangout. And I've got my very good friend and colleague with me, Federico Re. Federico, it's good to see you again, and thanks for coming along. Can I get you to tell us a bit about yourself?
Absolutely, Stuart. A big hello, and once again, thank you so much for having me. It's really exciting to have this opportunity tonight to talk about something that, for me, is a true passion and my devotion as far as the world of entrepreneurship, but particularly about the world of intrapreneurship. And really understanding the relevance and importance of this relatively new phenomenon in the business world, and how it's manifesting itself amongst the business community, particularly overseas. And tonight I want to share with yourself and with everyone else, how we can be more intrapreneurial, perhaps simply adopt that entrepreneurial mindset within the workplace environment. So I'm really eager to get going and explaining that a little bit more in detail later on.
Yeah, and I agree with you too. I think this is a topic that's growing in momentum, and there is a comprehension starting to enter the workplace that people can get involved with business without actually having to start a business, and then further themselves through that process. And this is what we're going to talk about tonight. I'm just going to bring up the slideshow here, so we'll do that. And tonight the session is about the exponential value of entrepreneurial employees, and this is presented tonight by Federico, who's just been speaking with me. And Federico, I'm just going to go through the program outline here. What we're going to find out tonight is quite a lot about the term intrapreneurship, and particularly, employee entrepreneurs with their capacity to get in and do things in a business environment. Now, to understand how that works and operates, here is the list of things that we're going to go through. There's the facts about this. It's quite a vague term, but it is something that is very definite and specific. So we're going to talk about the facts. We're going to go through a definition. There is some history here, and some of it is relatively new, but it does go back a wee way. There's some myths that we have to explore and put to bed, and Federico's going to go right through those with you. And then, of course, there's the mindset. What type of mindset do we need to bring to this particular role, and how we set ourselves up to not only become involved in entrepreneurship, but also how do we manage entrepreneurship in the workplace. And that's something that entrepreneurs need to know about. They need to understand how this can work for them, how they can control it, manipulate it, well, not to manipulate it, but manage it, so that they get the outcomes that they're looking to get from that as well. And then finally, we're going to talk about the future, and the future is going to lead us into something which I believe is particularly special, and we'll be elaborating on that as we go further in. Federico, I invite you to come in here and talk about intrapreneurship facts, because I think there's a fair bit of some substance there, and I'll switch over the slide so you can talk about that to us.
Yeah, sure. Look, just before we get into the crux of that spreadsheet, that note that you've got in front of you, I wanted to just point out the fact that for nearly 20 years I've been, involved in the entrepreneurial space. Starting and running and selling my own businesses successfully, and going through the highs and lows of being entrepreneurial. And obviously, to be entrepreneurial requires a certain mindset and a certain skill set and a certain attitude that is obviously very resilient, very, very determined, very passionate, very driven. It's only been in recent times, perhaps over the last couple of years, that I decided to explore how the entrepreneurial mindset can be implemented and manifested within the workplace environment. So basically offering the opportunity to employees who are either enterprising individuals or simply people who are creative or innovative and wanting to, you know, be the insider entrepreneur without necessarily taking the risks, you know, with their own business externally. So over the last couple of years, I've been doing a lot of research and reading a lot of articles and forums, especially overseas in the UK and America, where entrepreneurship is very much well known and has been manifested and openly proclaimed by business leaders for many years now. But the truth is, in Australia, we are still in the dark ages, and my role is to be a steward or perhaps an ambassador of entrepreneurship and really educate people on what is entrepreneurship and how to best apply it within the workplace environment. So, you know, this curriculum tonight that we're covering is perfect for that enterprise individual, but it's also perfect for that business owner who manages employees, or for that CEO or for that executive or senior manager that wants to really build that entrepreneurial culture. So I just wanted to give that background before we get stuck into figures and the nuts and bolts of entrepreneurship. So, Stuart, you've got notes above you right now where we look at facts, and these facts, you know, partly are my opinion and partly are factual based on my research done on the internet. And it is my view that only 1% of Australians actually know the real definition of the word entrepreneurship. And how I've determined that statistic is from, you know, the many coaching relationships that I've had, the many training sessions that I've had, the workshops, the masterclasses that I've engaged in over time. And typically I ask the question, especially when talking about entrepreneurship, is you know, what percentage of people today know about the word entrepreneurship? And I must admit, around 1% put up their hand. So I started to notice this trend, you know, a couple of years ago, which compelled me to start doing something about it to change this perception or perhaps level of ignorance with regards to this term. If we go on to the next statistic, which talks about the percentage of business owners that proactively embrace and foster that entrepreneurial culture within their workplace environment, in Australia, I believe it's only around 5%. Slightly better than the overall population, and yes, business owners are a little bit more knowledgeable about the term entrepreneurship, but particularly intrapreneurship, it's still quite low, of only 5%. What's really interesting as a contrast in terms of percentage is those who are indifferent or those who have an opinion that might be negative might put up their hand and say, look, if I was to employ an entrepreneurial employee, they would cause issues and they would be disruptive and they would, you know, cause headaches for us, for the management team, for the business owners. They're simply not worth taking on board. And of those people that question is asked, a high percentage of those who have a negative opinion share those views very openly. So it's an interesting statistic if we look at those three different points.
Okay, so yep, carry on to the next slide, Federico.
Sure. So, you know, if we look at if we move on to the definition of entrepreneurship, you know, entrepreneurship is something that, again, people are not too familiar with. And if we go to the definition, which is on the next page,
it's probably not showing for you, but it is in fact on the next page now.
Okay, I'm not sure if the viewers are actually noticing that definition. Here we go. So if we look at one definition, and this is a definition that was obtained from some source on the internet, it basically says that an intrapreneur is a person within a large corporation who takes direct responsibility for turning an idea into a profitable finished product through assertive risk-taking and innovation. That's a fairly straightforward description, and the things to take note here is the word innovation, risk-taking, profitability, and also large corporation. So just keep that in mind. If we move on to the next definition, a person that operates within an organisation and embraces innovation to pursue opportunity. Once again, if we take notice of the words opportunity, innovation, again, those words pop up again, so it's worth noting the common thread. I personally have a definition of my own, which I'd like to go through on the next page. So I've come up with my own definition, and an intrapreneur is simply an entrepreneurial employee, someone who thinks and acts like an entrepreneur, but prefers to work within an organization instead of having their own enterprise. So I believe this definition is simple, straightforward, and provides really an opportunity to any employee in an organization to explore how far they can go with their entrepreneurial endeavors, and really explore how their creative, innovative thoughts can be applied on a day-to-day within their roles to increase the competitiveness of their company, and to really pioneer new ideas, no different to, you know, the successful companies out there like Google and 3M and Yahoo and so forth. So what's interesting to note also is the origin of this word, formally acknowledged in the dictionary in the 1990s. So the history of that is actually not too long if we compare it to the word entrepreneur. And if we go to the next screen, we look at the history of intrapreneurship, and what's interesting to note, if we go on to the next screen again, Stuart, is really the history of the word intrapreneurship, again, appearing only in the 1990s as compared to the word entrepreneurship. If anyone wants to have a guess, I'll give you a couple of seconds to have a guess. When was the word entrepreneur first listed in the dictionary, or perhaps on a publication? Well, let's show that on the screen. It happened in 1723. So what's really interesting to note is the contrast between the word entrepreneurship, which appeared such a long time ago, 300 years ago, versus the word intrapreneurship, which only appeared 30 years ago. So there's a big difference between the awareness and the acknowledgement of both terms. So if we look at the history of intrapreneurship a little bit more carefully and in depth, I did mention earlier before that intrapreneurship has been widely embraced by business leaders such as, you know, the Richard Bransons of the world and the Larry Pages within the US and UK, where they've pioneered and fully adopted and embraced that entrepreneurial spirit and entrepreneurial culture within their companies like Virgin and Google and so forth since the 1970s. So yes, it's been around for 40 years, but the truth is in Australia it's hardly noticeable and hardly practiced by large corporations particularly. Once again, Steve Jobs, Larry Page, Richard Branson are ambassadors of that. And you know, perhaps my role in Australia is to be the same voice behind the word entrepreneur in Australia.
Now, Federico, I just want to jump in there and just talk to you a little bit about the topics of you know, entrepreneurs or business owners that would have issues with this concept. And I must admit, my first thoughts about it when I came across it initially was, you know, how do I control that? If I was to engage that and make that work in my business, how could I make that feasible, given that I'm opening it up and creating some risk taking and some variations in terms of what could happen. And then making sure that didn't hurt me financially. Are you able to elaborate a little bit on that?
Sure. Look, I think the first thing to note is let's look at those companies that have innovated successfully over time, and I've mentioned already a few names like Google and Virgin and 3M and Toyota and so forth. And let's stop and reflect for a moment to realize, well, if the business leaders or the founders openly proclaim that they wouldn't have been successful without their entrepreneurs, then what gives us the choice to say, well, we shouldn't be going down that path and we should just run the business in a traditional manner? If we look at those case studies, it gives me a strong, compelling reason to say to business owners or business leaders in Australia to say, well, you have no choice. If you want to be competitive, if you want to stay within the marketplace long term and survive, you have no choice. It's like saying, do you have a choice of not engaging in any social media for your business? You would have to say, I have to engage on some level of social media. No different to, I would have to engage in some level of entrepreneurship within the company. Now, that doesn't imply that every person within a company has to be entrepreneurial, because we also need, the conventional employee. But we need to stop and educate ourselves a little bit more to understand what is the entrepreneur, how does that entrepreneur differ to the conventional employee, and coming back to the entrepreneur, how can we nurture that relationship, how can we start building that entrepreneurial culture and leverage on those people, because they do have a different mindset, they do have a different skill set, they do have different ambitions, and let's see how we can tie the two knots together, rather than simply dismissing the idea out of ignorance, or having your own myth that entrepreneurs are bad for the company, they're a distraction, and so forth. So I think it's a matter of just being open-minded and accepting that perhaps some change needs to take place. And change is a very important word to use here. We need to change the culture of organisations, because from personal experience, a lot of large organisations, those that have been around for many, many years, still have cobwebs around their HR management process, and they need to really open up their minds to the creative and innovative world of entrepreneurship, which I'm so familiar with. So,
yeah, sorry, go on.
There are common myths and truths that I've come up with, and I've actually come up with 6 key points that I'd like to kind of explore with you today, Stuart. That kind of answers your question in a deeper way. So perhaps we can turn to that screen and have a look at that.
Yep. And here we go. Here, I was going to say, some of these thoughts and concepts that we have in our own minds are what tend to create, well, shall I say, rather than truths, untruths and myths around things we're not sure about. So, tell us a bit more about that.
Sure. So if I ask the typical business owner or employee or business leader what their thoughts are on entrepreneurs, they will typically raise the following issues or have their own opinions on the following subjects. So the first point I want to raise is on the next screen. So the question is, are entrepreneurs simply motivated by their own objectives and ambitions rather than primarily supporting the company's mission and values? So I'll ask the audience to have an opinion on that. Is it true or false? Is it a myth? Is it a fact? The honest truth is, and this is where the ambiguity begins, and this is where one has to make their own decision. I personally believe there is no right or wrong to that, because one entrepreneur might differ to another entrepreneur, and what's important is to be able to identify what truly motivates that person to work within that company and pursue certain goals, either for their own sake, which is not healthy, but preferably for the common good for both parties. So really this is about achieving a balance and harmony and a mutual win-win. So unfortunately there is no right or wrong to that, and it depends on the individual. But the key point to make here is that both parties need to be equally rewarded, and the ambitions of the individual employee needs to be aligned with the company's mission and values.
I think the other point too, Federico, is that both the intrapreneur and the entrepreneur are intent on doing the right thing by the business. So when that's recognised, there is a synergy or a congruence of activity that works towards the same objective.
Well, look, from time to time you do have entrepreneurs that might push the boundaries too far, and they're perhaps a little bit too aggressive, but I think largely let's focus on the positive, and there are great people out there that are doing it for the right reason. The second point, and the question is, do entrepreneurs challenge the status quo and work outside of the operational guidelines, causing disruption and headaches for management? Yes and no. And again, I can agree on the fact that entrepreneurs generally like to challenge the status quo and push the boundaries. Do they cause disruption? Sometimes yes, they do. Can they cause headaches for management? Absolutely, because management can sometimes be, rigid or perhaps unaware of how to best handle the entrepreneur because culturally they're different, or maybe they simply don't have that understanding or awareness of what drives that entrepreneur. But the thing to really take note here as a positive is that, whilst they challenge the status quo, I call that innovation and I call that pioneering. So that's a positive thing. If we look at the next point, are entrepreneurs risk takers? Are they prepared to push the boundaries, causing potential financial and operational risks? Once again, yes, they can cause potential financial and operational risks. Yes, they can be risk takers. They can push hard. The point to really make here, however, is that at the end of the day, an entrepreneur can walk away if something fails, as compared to the entrepreneur or the business owner that has to pick up the pieces if something doesn't go to plan. So I think there needs to be set boundaries for the entrepreneur, and you know, to avoid you know, things going pear-shaped. So things can only be pushed so far, and risks can only be attempted so far. But again, it depends on the nature of the business. And if we perhaps just think about Google, what did they have to experiment with? What risks did they have to take? And again, there's no exact formula for that. It depends on the individual company and what they're trying to pursue within their industry. So if we look at point 4, are entrepreneurs focused on constant innovation, change, and pioneering of new concepts without taking into account the financial viability? Firstly, yes, they are very focused on innovation and change and pioneering of new ideas. Do they take into account the financial viability of the idea? Well, that's up to management to assist in that process, and management needs to provide the necessary tools and appropriate communication channels and data available to be able to equip the entrepreneurial employee to be able to know what the boundaries are and how far and how much can the innovation be pushed. One thing to note is innovation can only be helpful, can only be useful and productive if that innovative idea is brought to market and is commercialized. There's no point having innovative ideas if they're disruptive to a company. So ideally, ultimately, those innovative products or services need to be brought to market in a manner that's viable. If we go on to point 5, are they interested only in achieving their own goals and business pursuits rather than focusing on the welfare of the company alone? From time to time, you may have entrepreneurs that are very hungry for their own success because they're trying to perhaps establish themselves in a safe workplace environment before they go off and pursue their own, you know, business pursuits. So that's something to watch out for. But largely, if we're dealing with an entrepreneur, for me, it implies that they're happy to work within an organisation as long as they're given a degree of autonomy and a degree of flexibility to explore those creative, innovative ideas that they have. And finally, if we look at the last point, equally important is, do entrepreneurs think like entrepreneurs, and are they better suited running their own business? I believe no, they're different. I believe entrepreneurs are very different to entrepreneurs. Perhaps they share the same type of mindset, but probably their biggest character difference or skill set difference or attribute is their willingness to take risks. And perhaps that is the key underlying difference between an entrepreneur and an entrepreneur. At the end of the day, if an entrepreneur wanted to have their own business, they would have been an entrepreneur. They wouldn't have decided to work within an organisation. So entrepreneurs, on the other hand, are able to go out in the wild and deal with the risks associated with survival and failure and setbacks much more than the entrepreneur that is, at the end of the day, protected by the government, the organisation's protocol and systems that are in place. So that covers 6 key points relating to the truths and myths of entrepreneurs, but it should hopefully provide a good perspective on how entrepreneurs think, and it's up to the audience to decide whether they believe their entrepreneurs or their employees would fit one category or the other. But again, it's about careful management, and it's about understanding what ticks the entrepreneur to keep them happy, but equally to make it a win-win for the organisation.
And I think, Federico, that if you really looked hard enough, particularly at some of these organisations in the United States, that you would find that there would be more intrapreneurs than entrepreneurs. And I think that there's a dynamic there that is creating dimension for these organizations. They know that they've got the entrepreneurial skill sets in the leadership roles, but they've got these entrepreneurs inside these organizations pushing up with their their abilities to create new events, new opportunities, and new revenue streams for these organizations. What type of mindset do you think would be prevalent in some of these entrepreneurs? Perhaps if we can look at that.
Sure. I guess the first thing to be aware of is that there are different types of people out there, and if we can show the screen, if we can go to the next point. So how does an entrepreneur compare to mindset to a conventional employee? Let's do some quick comparison. I believe the entrepreneur differs to the conventional employee because they have the desire for change. They are willing to push the boundaries. They are willing to challenge the status quo and not necessarily be in that safe environment and simply follow protocol. So they seek that challenge, and they want to do more than what has been suggested or what has been offered to them, and I guess they want to be recognized for their efforts, for their achievements. They want to be rewarded, perhaps in a different way or in an elevated way to a conventional employee. The second point that you've got there, Stuart, is entrepreneurs. How do they differ to business owners? Well, again, that's an interesting difference. A business owner has decided to go on their own and start a business, but a business owner is not necessarily entrepreneurially minded. So entrepreneurs still have that entrepreneurial gene, and their minds tick typically like entrepreneurs, as compared to business owners that can simply be, a traditional business owner that's been running a business for 50 years where there's been no innovation and they've barely survived. So, there's a big difference between the entrepreneur and the business owner. If we go to point 3, well, I think I've covered that in the previous subject or the previous chapter. Entrepreneurs do differ to entrepreneurs primarily from the risk-taking perspective, and I believe that entrepreneurs really are on the top of the food chain as far as risk-taking compared to entrepreneurs. Or perhaps if we go to the next point, really what's on the top of the food chain or what's on the top of that pyramid is the serial entrepreneur. That person that, again, likes to throw themselves in the deep end and is almost the pirate of the business world, willing to risk their reputation, willing to risk anything to make an opportunity realised, or simply a person that never sees it being an issue but simply an opportunity. So I think it's worth noting that amongst these 5 professions, let's call them, what lies beneath them in terms of mindset, skill set, and attributes can be very different, but there's also common threads. The question I have for the audience is, where do you fit in the spectrum? I'd like to think that tonight our audience is the potential entrepreneur, so they would be ticking, the entrepreneur as their preferred status. Or perhaps they're a conventional employee, but they're seeking an avenue to explore opportunity within the company and apply themselves on a high level, particularly with their creative ideas and so forth. Or maybe it's time to jump ship and go into your own business and be really entrepreneurial, but that's not the focus for tonight.
Now, one of the things that keeps running through my mind is for all of this, we'd have to plan what's happening, Federico. How do we make sure that we have these people channeled and doing the right things for us? And I can't get away from the fact that I've got to get all my eggs in a row before I bring on entrepreneurs and start managing them in a process where they actively challenging me in terms of what's happening in my business. Perhaps if we could just lead into now a little bit about how to best manage entrepreneurs and what would you say would be the most suitable processes for that?
I think the first thing I want to say is actually provide an analogy of the animal kingdom, and I think this is a good simple way of understanding how animals behave out there in the wild, or perhaps how we as masters need to deal with our dog as being a dog master. So at the end of the day, it's important for the dog to know who's the master, and it's no different to the intrapreneur knowing who the boss is and who is the person really taking the ultimate risk. So it really is a fine balancing act, trying to manage that animal, or trying to manage that particular beast that can be different. And I use such terms because intrapreneurs can be a challenge and can be difficult to tame at times because they like to just go off in their own tangents. So there really is an art form towards entrepreneurial leadership and entrepreneurial management, and I've provided some key points to consider, which, Stuart, if you don't mind putting that up on the screen.
Yep, we'll just lead into the next slides here. So here we go. How to best manage entrepreneurs.
So how do we best manage entrepreneurs? And obviously this is relevant to, you know, the business manager, the executive, the business leader, the CEO, or the person that feels that within their team there is a diamond in the rough. You know, there is an entrepreneur, that a potential entrepreneur that can flourish and can rise to that next level. So firstly, it's important to take notice of who are the potential candidates. Obviously not all employees are capable of going to that next level of entrepreneurship. So if we go to the next page and we look at point one suggestion I have is to implement a regular meeting place where new ideas can be discussed amongst the team, and innovation and change is the focus. So it's not about protocol, it's not about, you know, compliance, it's not about the usual day-to-day, it's about challenging the status quo. It's an environment where ideas can be thrown around and no one's there to judge whether they're good or bad, or no one's there to judge if they're ridiculous or if they're too risky. Obviously those opinions can be expressed, but there should be an open communication channel to encourage that type of discussion. So it can be a brainstorming session, but it has to be core to, you know, to the structure on a day-to-day, or perhaps implemented weekly or monthly within an organisation. So, you know, whatever you call that meeting place, perhaps it can be called, you know, building that entrepreneurial culture, and within that, you know, title is an agenda that focuses on innovation, focuses on change, and focuses on increased competitiveness and really bouncing ideas amongst people. So it's also worth noting that the type of candidates that should participate in this meeting should really be of all calibers, and you know, whilst this might sound, you know, inappropriate, but, you know, even the cleaner of a business has something to offer. And from past experience, when running previous businesses, sometimes those people that would often be ignored for great ideas would sometimes come into a discussion casually and suggest some amazing ideas, and those ideas actually stuck with the management team and they were actually implemented into viable products or services. So every person has that potential, but it has to be encouraged through some meeting place like a conduit. So that's the first thing. The second point is providing positive feedback for outside the square ideas without dismissing the idea too prematurely. Often in a workplace environment, an idea that might be a little bit too out there gets dismissed and crushed immediately, and all that does is that it crushes the entrepreneurial spirit, and it doesn't allow for that little bit of innovation to manifest. It's important to have an attitude like yes, not, rather than no. And if we simply look at Richard Branson, who you know, he's nicknamed Dr. Yes. He's nicknamed Dr. Yes because whenever an employee goes to him and suggests a new idea, his response will be always yes, but I'll consider it. Let me think about it, rather than oh no, that's not feasible, or that's just a bit too risky, whatever. So it's about changing the language and encouraging those ideas and not dismissing them too early. If we go to point 3, micromanagement can really crush the entrepreneurial spirit. Once again, it's important to allow a level of autonomy and not necessarily monitor results on a day-to-day or minute-by-minute, but see the goodwill, see the spirit that's there, look at the effort that's put into ideas, and really the passion that exists within the roles of individuals. Obviously, results need to be produced, but again, entrepreneurs, or intrapreneurs for that matter, they like to have challenges, they like to have targets, they like to be given a challenge and then left alone. So leave them alone, have clear targets or KPIs or whatever you want to call it, but give them an opportunity to roam around on their own without throwing them into a cage. So that also includes minimizing the hierarchy in the management structure. In other words, having a flatlined management structure so that everyone can contribute on that same level. The fourth point, which if I were to work in an organization, perhaps I would be most frustrated by red tape or bureaucratic excuses, compliance, and all those guidelines that restrict flexibility, restrict ideas to be thrown around or new ideas to be experimented and tested. So it's really important to open up the gates and allow those ideas to be explored, and even to the point where they fail, and even to the point where there's a setback. And again, it's important to accept failure and accept a setback as a good thing, because you can't succeed unless you fail, and that's very much the philosophy of an entrepreneur and also my experiences. But in a typical corporate environment, failure is a dirty word, and failure is not allowed, and hence why a lot of bureaucratic excuses and red tape exists. So if we go to the last point, I believe is point 5, rewarding the high achievers and officially acknowledging their efforts. Entrepreneurs, like intrapreneurs, they want to feel acknowledged for their efforts, or perhaps be rewarded from their hard work, from their endeavors. And yes, every employee wants to be acknowledged, but entrepreneurs particularly, because they push the boundaries, because they take relatively high risks, they want to be acknowledged for their efforts, and that also means publicly acknowledging their achievements and spreading that word around the company so that culture gets it becomes contagious. And if you reward those high achievers, that's where other employees take notice, and eventually or potentially they might themselves want to pursue this path of intrapreneurship.
And yet, look, I'm looking at some of the organisations in the US, Federico, and they have such a vibrant culture, and they've got this fostering inside their organisations, and they're encouraging more and more of their employees to get involved. I really feel this is going to take off in Australia. I know it's really in its infancy here, but once people understand how they can really develop their business, their platform, their revenue base, and a whole host of business components, it's going to be quite revolutionary, and I can't wait for it to happen. How do you see the future? What's going to happen here?
I think that companies simply don't have a choice to sit back and be complacent about developing that entrepreneurial culture within the company. They firstly need to be educated to understand what intrapreneurship is. Secondly, they need to identify those potential candidates that can be brought or focused or trained to think more intrapreneurially. So obviously, leveraging on those enterprising individuals, and really understanding how companies like 3M and Apple and Sony and Toyota, Google, Virgin have all done it over the years. And really looking at those case studies more carefully, and that's something that I do, educate people on as well within my programs. So it's really about taking that first step and understanding the philosophy that business leaders have. And if we turn to one of your next screens, Stuart, where we look at what Richard Branson and Larry Page have to say about intrapreneurship. So the bold statement that Richard Branson has to say is that he couldn't have built the Virgin Empire into more than 200 companies without the help of his entrepreneurs. And equally, Larry Page says he couldn't have taken his search algorithms to the market without his Google team. So I believe in that. There's plenty of proof and evidence that these companies have been successful because of the right leadership, because of the right blend of entrepreneurs and also employees, conventional employees. So it really is a matter of time to shift that mindset within companies and start embracing this attitude and changing the way we do business, I guess, moving into the next cycle of the future.
Yeah, and look, around this word in entrepreneurship, there are some very big names, and we've got two on the slide there, but there are many, many more names that are embracing entrepreneurship, fostering their teams, developing the capability inside those teams. I really can feel that this hasn't really stepped up yet in Australia, and I think it's coming. But I think what we've gone through today with what you presented, Federico, is quite comprehensive. And if a Australian entrepreneur was looking at this now, I would imagine that he's really starting to think about this in a much more comprehensive way. And perhaps if we could just flow on from here and talk about exactly what it is you've presented and what people have found out through most of this webinar so far.
Sure, Stuart. So I guess in summary and in essence, if we turn to your next screen, Stuart, what I'd like to point out is today's session is really a preliminary view on entrepreneurship, and obviously there's a lot more we can explore and discover, and that's a course and a program that I run, which we will talk shortly about. But today what we've definitely learned is that entrepreneurship is an undisputed key ingredient to the future success of a company. The second point is that entrepreneurs like to innovate, they're entrepreneurially spirited, and they like to bring new ideas to the market. And thirdly, entrepreneurs need to be carefully managed to avoid a conflict of interest and ensure overall harmony within the workplace environment. Those key points essentially summarize what we've covered today, and I believe we might have a few more points in the next page, if I'm correct. No, so I guess this leads us to the point where and this is addressing it to the audience, is if you understand the value and the meaning of entrepreneurship, I guess it's a matter of taking it to the next level and asking yourself that key question: do I want to transform a portion of my employees to think more entrepreneurially so that I can be more competitive, so that I can pioneer new ideas, commercialize them, grow your revenue, and stand out from the rest and be highly competitive along the lines of those companies and brands that we've looked at before? And if the answer is yes, then I have a program which we will talk about in a few seconds, and perhaps we can go on to that next screen, Stuart.
Yeah, sure. I just wanted to perhaps ask the audience, if you're a middle manager or a senior manager and you've got to the point where you're saying, well, what's next? Then I think what we're about to reveal is definitely for you. I think also if you're an entrepreneur or a business owner and you're concerned about whether business is tapered off, or you're in a holding pattern, or you just don't know where to take your business, this could also be for you. This is a program that's going to fit both categories, and I think it's pretty exciting. And what I'd like to do, perhaps, Federico, is talk a little bit about you and introduce you as the key trainer of the program we're going to talk about. And Federico, I've known you for a while. I can testify to our audience that you're a man that has walked the talk, because you've been involved with your own businesses. You've built them up to a substantial level and then sold them on. And you've been involved on both sides of the fence. You've been involved in intrapreneurship and entrepreneurship. And as such, you've developed yourself into a substantial and well-known entrepreneurial coach operating in Australia. You've also now moved into this entrepreneurship training, and there is a quality aspect to this based around the fact that you are spearheading this topic, particularly down under. And we both know that your capacity as a business growth strategist is second to none, because we've seen that in action already. And then finally, as a business author, Federico is one that is being published quite extensively throughout a number of publications, some of which you can see on the page there, but not limited to. And this is an ongoing element to Federico's provision to the marketplace, not only as a coach but as an advisor and of somebody of note. So
if I can just add one other point, Stuart, some of those magazines that we all know quite well in the Australian marketplace, I believe it's my duty as an ambassador of entrepreneurship to really educate people out there. And a lot of the articles that I've written in recent times really focus on this exact subject of entrepreneurship. So if you go to my LinkedIn page or to my website, you'll actually have an opportunity to read a lot of these articles or blogs that I've written exclusively for these particular magazines. So my endeavours long term is to continue doing that and spreading the word around Australia.
Yeah, and your presence is seen on a number of online facilities as well, and so anybody will be able to find you and get a rundown on your capabilities. And with that, what we'd like to introduce to our audience today is the program Develop Your Entrepreneurial Skills. And this is a 4-week online program consisting of 4 2-hour private sessions with Master Trainer Federico Re, and this is valued on this slide at $1,895. I think it's worth much more than this, because you wouldn't get this outside of this arena for this price. So this is already something really special and blows me away. Federico, can I ask you to perhaps take us through each of those 4 sessions and just elaborate on what's included, because that's going to give our audience a perception of what's included and the perception of value inside as well. Kick that off with your first slide.
Okay, so if we look at the first session or part 1, I like to start with what is entrepreneurship. So commencing with entrepreneurship rather than intrapreneurship, especially for those who are not aware of what goes on in the world of entrepreneurship. So I like to just bring to their awareness, how do entrepreneurs think, what their key attributes are, and essentially what are the common traits of entrepreneurs. The next main area is, how do entrepreneurs deal with setbacks, failures, uncertainty, pressure, and other negative factors. And this is the real world of entrepreneurship, very different to the real world of employees, where generally speaking their jobs are quite secure on a day-to-day, as compared to the volatility of an entrepreneur not knowing what's around the corner. The third point is why and how entrepreneurs prefer to work outside of their comfort zone. So why do entrepreneurs like to jump off a cliff and experience that adrenaline to pursue opportunity? And the fourth point is how your own entrepreneurial instincts and skills can be harnessed into powerful building tools within your professional role at work. So it's a matter of exploring whether or not you have those skills, and I believe everyone has the potential to be entrepreneurial by simply asking the question, are you passionate about what you do, or are you needing an opportunity to apply your creative skills in whatever area? And if you answer yes to those simple 2 questions, then you have an opportunity to be labelled a potential entrepreneur. In the second session, I like to sort of zoom into the core of the program, which is about entrepreneurship, but again, it's an introduction where we look at the origins, the history, the facts of entrepreneurship on a deeper level, and why entrepreneurs are needed for the success of any organisation. And point 3 being how business leaders around the world are leveraging on their entrepreneurs to fuel growth, going beyond the examples that I've shared already today. Fourth point is understanding, again, the mindset, strengths, and weaknesses of entrepreneurial employees. And take notice of the word weaknesses as well, because it's sort of starting to open up a can of worms about how to carefully manage entrepreneurs if you're a business manager. The last point is how entrepreneurs use creativity and innovation to pioneer new ideas. In the next session, part 3, we get really stuck into entrepreneurship, particularly relevant to your role or profession within the workplace environment. So what drives the entrepreneur to perform better than conventional employees? and how to deal with risk, uncertainty, isolation, failure, criticism by other peers or management. And that point is very important to understand and to learn and to embrace. In other words, how to develop thick skin in dealing with the realities of being entrepreneurial within a workplace environment. The third point is how to act in a team environment and effectively communicate your ideas to your peers without being isolated or discriminated or feeling rejected. And that is unfortunately a reality that does manifest and exist. The last point is how to transform your ideas into commercial opportunities. Again, like I mentioned before, it's not good enough to have ideas. It's important to know how to bring them to the market, commercially speaking, and that's something that I teach people how to do. And finally, the fourth section. If we continue on section 3, actually there is quite a lot we go through in this section. I've just reminded myself is how to deal with red tape, bureaucracy, protocol, other barriers that might hinder innovation. How to make faster, better informed decisions without the angst to secure opportunities within the marketplace. On that particular point, effective decision making is crucial to learn in order to bring an idea to market sooner than later. So if we can learn how to effectively make decisions and commit to those with the management team, it's a matter of make or break. The third point is how to maintain a high level of enthusiasm and energy during turbulent and uncertain times. So how basically not to lose the entrepreneurial mojo during that period of time. And finally, in section 3, how to act as a strong role model to other employees and play an instrumental part in building the entrepreneurial culture within the company. So how to encourage others to follow suit. The fourth and final section, which really wraps up the course, is particularly for the leaders and the managers out there who have employees that they want to or need to manage more successfully and turn them into intrapreneurs. The first point is how to best leverage on the skill set mindset of the intrapreneur, how to limit or avoid pioneering new ideas interfering with the overall progress of the company. Point 3 is how to build an entrepreneurial culture within the workplace and encourage others to embrace entrepreneurship. The last point here is how to manage risk effectively whilst dealing with setbacks and failure. And then on the last page, we have how to set guidelines and boundaries for the intrapreneur without compromising their entrepreneurial spirit, how to set a clear channel of communication amongst the team to fuel innovation and pioneering new ideas, and last but not least, how to effectively manage the frustrated intrapreneur that doesn't achieve what they desire. So, you know, it's a very mixed bag of lollies, and really it's a comprehensive course that really covers from end to end the whole nature of entrepreneurship and how to make it work in a real life practice. So that covers the program in its entirety, Stuart.
Yep, there's a very thorough grounding in the whole course. I can see that you know, once somebody's completed all 4 segments, they're going to come away with a fair amount of not only knowledge but capability in terms of how to apply that into a intrapreneur role. Now, some of the people that have already experienced this from you, here is Kurush Zaiwala, who is from Mission Australia. He says Federico has played a pivotal role in developing the mentoring and coaching programs at Mission Australia. He has been of significant value to many business owners and budding entrepreneurs wanting to achieve success. We've got Cesar Duran from El Cielo Foods. Working with Federico was a breath of fresh air. He has deep business concepts but explains them simply and clearly. He has given us a lot of insight and direction during our first year of operation. Thanks, Federico. We've got Elizabeth Chase from Chase Legal. The Develop Your Entrepreneurial Skills program. So this is the program we're exactly talking about. Was enormously valuable in helping me bridge the gap between technical proficiency and business viability. Federico was instrumental in enhancing my mindset to help me leverage on my entrepreneurial skills. And finally, we have Wendy Grenfell from Elgin Hall. I've had the privilege of spending quite a bit of time with Wendy, and she doesn't talk lightly about anyone. So here it is for Federico. Federico and I were fellow coaches at the Branson Centre of Entrepreneurship in South Africa. I am inspired by Federico's passion for coaching and for his 100% commitment to his clients' business success. So there's 4 really good testimonials to the fact that what you'll get from Federico is of significant value and will make changes in your organization. And we've got some bonuses here which Federico has kindly provided. So we're not only getting the 4-part course, which is comprehensive, 4 lots of 2 hours, you're going to get these as well. This is bonus number 1. This is free audio copies of each of those sessions. So you'll be able to play back the recorded sessions anytime. You'll be able to do it either on an iPod, an iPhone, a tablet, a PC. You can even put them up to the cloud and draw them down when you like. The value of that is $295. On top of that, we've got bonus number 2. This is one of Federico's top selling or top popular ebooks. It's his latest one as well. It's a Millionaire Coach, and in it you'll discover the millionaire mindsets of another 16 Australian entrepreneurs, and it includes their recipes for personal growth. So that's got to be worth gold in itself. Here today it's valued at $19.95. Federico, do you want to add a word on that at all?
I guess in a nutshell, that book shares my intimate, experiences and views and all my journey from early childhood into my early years of business, as I was, only 22 when I started business, and what I learned over those years. And I provide essentially key tips and recipes on how to develop that millionaire mindset, or really that entrepreneurial mindset, to achieve anything that you want. So it's a must read, and my views are equally shared with other people, and between us there are definite common threads. So this is really the Bible to learning how to develop that ultimate mindset.
Right, now Federico has twisted my arm and I'm providing one of my books. This is my latest one, which is Turn on Your Own Success. This is including 3 very distinct personal processes that you put in place every day that will ensure that you will always have success in what you do or what you're attempting to do. So it's very, very important. It's about setting direction. It's about meditation, and it's about visualization, and you'll get all of this in this book. It tells you how to do it, how to follow it, all the techniques that you need to use, and how to make that a very simple process each and every day. Again, that's valued at $19.95. But Federico, I think both of those ebooks are worth 10 times more than that. So here's what we get. 4 weeks of online training by Federico. This is the 4 2-hour sessions. That's at $1895. You're getting the 4 audio copies of each of those, so that's valued at $295. You get the ebook, The Millionaire Coach, which is Federico's popular book, at $19.95, and Stuart's own ebook, Turn on Your Own Success, also valued at $19.95. The total there is at $2,229. But look, that's not where we're going to stop. We're going to add a little bit more in there, and the next item is bonus number 4, and this is entrepreneurial networking in the face of the entrepreneurs, and you're going to receive 2 free tickets to the next main event, which is coming up in Melbourne. Perhaps, Federico, I'll get you to just talk a bit about that as well, if you would.
Sure, Stuart. The Face of Entrepreneurs was established about 3-4 months ago in Melbourne with the intent of providing a unique and complementary networking program for business owners, for entrepreneurs, for budding entrepreneurs, and even for the intrapreneur, wanting to connect with other like-minded people and basically share their stories, their experiences, and be inspired by each other. So we have guest speakers that come along, and at our last event, which we held a couple of weeks ago, we had serial entrepreneur Martin Martinez from the Entrepreneurial Coach, who also presented his story, which was very engaging and very inspirational for our members. And this entrepreneurial program also has an escape component and basically an adventure part to it, which is very much the philosophy of Richard Branson, where we go and do some activity like ice skating or rock climbing, and all of that is contained within those free tickets. So it's enormous value, and it's something to consider, especially if you're based in Melbourne and you want to have an escape and connect with the right type of people. Part of the Face of Entrepreneurs program is also the live radio show, which Stuart himself and I run with our co-founders, and it's an opportunity for you to be participating as a guest speaker on this live radio show on Google Hangout, exactly how we're doing it tonight. And that is an excellent opportunity for you to promote yourself in terms of what you do in whatever space, whether you're a business owner, whether you're the entrepreneur, whether you're a business leader or an entrepreneur, or equally market your business on this program. So there is immense value here, and as it's stated there, it's priced at $975.
Yeah, and look, it's early days with both of those events too, Federico. So each event is pulling in more and more people, and as it gets more popular, the price of that's going to go up. So that value is only an early day price, early day value, $975. But in terms of what that is as a bonus in itself, it's of significant value, and you'll see that will become much more valuable as we go along. I'm going to move into our next bonus, which is really what I feel is the key to the whole thing, because not only do you get the course content, but here you get the quick coaching. And in this quick coaching, we're talking about 5 30-minute online quick coaching sessions with Federico. This is one-on-one mentoring, entrepreneurial coaching, and technical business advisory in an additional 5 sessions. So you've got to understand what this means. This is somebody giving you their time, a top quality coach, one-on-one, and you will get, on top of the course content, that exposure, one-on-one, 5 30-minute periods. It's valued at $470. I really think that's well under what it should be. But let's look at this now. So here's what you get. Develop your entrepreneurial skills program. That's the 4 2-hour sessions as outlined by Federico just a few minutes ago. That's $1,895. Plus you get the 5 bonuses. Bonus 1 is the audio copies, so you can listen to this over and over again. Bonus 2 is the Millionaire Coach book, which interviews 16 Australian entrepreneurs, successful entrepreneurs. Turn on your own success, the key components to help you have daily success in your life with whatever it is you're attempting, and particularly in intrapreneurship or entrepreneurship, whichever you prefer to use it in. 2 tickets to the Face of Entrepreneurs next live event, and finally the 5 30-minute one-on-one sessions with Federico Re. That is an awesome package. Tonight that value is $3,675. We are going to knock some off it. We're not going to make it $2,995. We're not going to make it $2,595. We're not even going to make it $2,195. Tonight we've got a special for the next 15 minutes only, $1,495. All you need to do is be the first 15 to go to the URL listed there in red at the bottom there, intra.eventbrite.com.au. That's intra.eventbrite.com.au. You need to go there now because this will get snapped up, and I can see there's two on the site already. So this is happening as we speak. 1495. You couldn't get better value than that. Federico, have you got a last minute comment you'd like to make for us tonight?
Absolutely, Stuart. Well, firstly, thank you for facilitating the process of communicating what intrapreneurship is all about. So I'm very grateful of that. What I also want to say to the listeners is an investment of only $1,495 is a tiny investment towards either your professional career and advancing that to the next level and getting the acknowledgement, the reward, and the experience of being, more entrepreneurial within your own workplace environment. It really is about your career, it's about your success, it's about your satisfaction and fulfillment, particularly if you're more geared up to being an intrapreneur within an organisation rather than taking that other step of going into business itself. So this is really the perfect opportunity to finally experiencing that entrepreneurial feeling, but within a safe workplace environment. So here's a chance to take action and not procrastinate, not dwell, because you've got all the information at hand. And I'm driven and I'm passionate and I'm committed to assisting you in really learning that one-on-one, because I'm determined to assist where possible. So it's my legacy and my long-term ambition.
Thanks, Federico. It's been great having you on the show tonight, and I think we've had a very informative session. By all means, everyone, please go and pick up this valuable session, and it's only $1,495 right now. There's only a few left. With that, I'm going to sign out, and thank you very much, everyone, for joining in today.